To break it down, our friend and former Viking offensive lineman Alex Boone, along with Courtney Cronin here. What's going on, Alex? How are you?
Matt, I am great. How are you?
I am
Courtney?
awesome. Real
Hey, how's it
football.
going?
Great.
So I want to ask you about playing with Alex Smith, but we'll do that in a minute. Tell
Oh,
me.
dude, you're going to the vault for that one.
Yeah, no, I know. And you were mostly like a young buck then,
I
right? So
was.
you were kind of watching Alex Smith. All right, let's just start there, and then we could get to the truck fire up front in a little bit.
Okay.
But here's what my thought was, Alex, that if Kirk Cousins plays like Alex Smith, where he is conservative, but he doesn't turn the ball over, and when a big play is required, he can pull it out and throw it down the field to Adam Thielen or Stephon Diggs, then Gary Kubiak's going to be a happy man. And if they have to throw 40 passes like they did last year, then they're not going to be happy, and that probably means they lost.
Yeah, I mean, I'm agreeing with you on this, but the problem for me becomes what happens when you can't run the ball one week? Like, you're going to eventually you're going to become that team that wants to throw the ball 45 times because there's going to be a defense that you're going to meet that says, hey, you just can't run the ball that well on us. And, for us back in the day, it used to be Seattle. Like, every time we used to go play Seattle, they always stop our run. We don't, it just, their scheme, the way they would play against us, the intensity of the game, like, there was a lot of factors that went into it. But those are the games that we would end up getting mauled, like 41-7, because we didn't have anything other than a run game. So you need a quarterback. And I see what you're saying in that is the Kirk Cousins, Alex Smith, is that, is that comparable? And I agree. I think it is comparable, but it's a dangerous thing to say that because when you have a quarterback that's conservative, that won't take those shots, that kind of checks it down a lot and it kind of irritates you, eventually he's going to have to win you a game. And that's the scary thought.
Well, I think that we got into that subject right before the break, just talking about the game manager notion, because I feel like of any quarterback that's kind of in that same tier with Kirk Cousins, Alex Smith got that label all the time.
Yeah.
And right or wrong, Kirk Cousins was that on Sunday. And if you think about the ways, like, is this sustainable? 38 runs, 10 passes? Well, probably not. And a lot of game plans aren't going to dictate it being this way, where you're up 21-0 at halftime. But big picture wise, I mean, can they do this in other circumstances down the line? I don't think it's going to happen in Green Bay. Because like you talked about, Alex, like, there's going to be certain defenses that just don't let you run the ball that well. But can you see this becoming maybe like a periodic trend of the way that they're able to win games?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can sustain this for a while. I think that this is, you really go as far as you want to go. I mean, I remember when we were on our runs and it was like nobody could get in our way. Now, there was a couple teams, like I said, Seattle, we always played them. And for whatever reason, that game just went south for us. And I don't know why, but I can think of the year that we went up there into Seattle and we just started getting killed. And it was like a bad feeling in our taste in our mouth. But you can win a lot of games by running the ball and playing great defense. It's just, can you win the big games? Can you win the games? Can your quarterback go out maybe 3, 4, 5 times a year and put up the big numbers in the passing game, 300, 400 yards, and get you the 4 or 5 touchdowns without losing the game?
Yeah, in 2011, you went 13-3 with that San Francisco team and ran for over 2,000 yards as a team and only allowed 1,200 on the ground. And actually, Alex, I didn't remember this, that you played with one of my favorite guys ever, Boobie Dixon. Remember Boobie Dixon?
D.
From Mississippi State.
Yeah, Boobie D
Yes.
is the freaking best.
I loved him. He was our goal line back. And he was the guy
He's a
that, like, when
big
you
dude.
wanted to smash somebody's face, you put Boobie in.
Yeah.
Because he was every bit of a fullback in a running back's body.
I know.
Oh, yeah.
And he was just a great guy to talk to. And he was in Buffalo when I was there. So he was
That's
one
right.
of the best. Yep. So
He would always come back to Mississippi State's spring game when I was down in
but he still
down
tweets
there.
himself
Yeah.
doing that. Yep.
He still does.
Covering that. He'll always, like, they always designed a trick play for him, like, to just run in off the sideline and catch a touchdown pass. It's awesome.
I love the guys that you run into that aren't stars, but you get to know them a little bit because of that, because they're not sort of sheltered off. And anyway, Anthony Dixon, one of my favorites ever. But this season, though, is reflective of what the Vikings want, that 2011 San Francisco season. You run for over 2,000 as a team. You give up 1,200. You give up 3 rushing touchdowns. The defense is absolutely fantastic. Alex, I don't think that this is generally a model to win the Super Bowl, because of course it isn't. The model to win a Super Bowl is to have Tom Brady or Ben Roethlisberger or Drew Brees. That's how you win a Super Bowl. But if you don't have them, the closest you're going to get is about like this. This year in 2011, it was the 11th ranked offense, which is solid but not unbelievable. 2nd ranked defense in points allowed. I think if the Vikings copied this, and they can with their defense, then you're talking about a division title, and then you're just hoping in the playoffs that it works out.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at that Super Bowl, that was such a rough year for me to think about because it was such a tough game. But those were two evenly matched teams. The only thing that they did was they could pass the ball better than we could at certain times. I mean, I'm not saying that they were stellar or they were Peyton Manning-esque, but they could throw the ball to Jacoby Jones, and they had Anquan Bolden.
Bolden was unbelievable, yeah.
I mean, and that's where we really saw Anquan, and that's when we were like, okay, we need him on our team. And we thought that he was going to be the missing piece for our team that was going to help Kaepernick kind of take that next step. But I mean, Joe Flacco was not a Peyton Manning or a Tom Brady, but he could put the ball down the field with accuracy, and that's why they were ahead of us in that game.
It's even wilder that season. So that's the next season, 2012. 2,400 yards rushing as a team, which is outrageous. But of course, you had a running quarterback. So
Right.
Anyway, I mean, just to make the point, it's that teams have done this in the past and been successful with it. But I tend to think, Alex, if the offensive line is not really, really good and much better in pass protection than they were on Sunday, that this plan could fall apart with Kirk Cousins getting killed or with him getting pressured all the time. And that's when the fumbles come. He did fumble the other day. And when he took a couple of blindside hits, especially the one where Grady Jarrett strips the ball from him, I'm thinking if you do this against Green Bay, if you do this against Chicago, then we're going to have a problem here.
Yeah, I mean, this defense was coming off a year that they were like, where was the pass rush? So when you start talking about these teams that actually have a pass rush, I think a lot of it was communication. You talk about him getting hit from his blind side. That was a communication thing. Somebody's obviously going to have the safety. And when he triggers, somebody was supposed to come off, but they didn't. The funny thing is when you watch the replay, you can always tell whose guy it is by who turns around first. Like who turns around and goes, oh my God, he just came, like, oh dude. And I could instantly tell who it was. But a lot of that you clean up in the film and you say, hey, listen, our quarterback's standing back there. We can't let him get plastered like this. Like this is just unacceptable. This is your communication. You got to know, you got to leave. And it's just a couple guys getting on the same page. But there were some things that were a little shaky to watch. And I agree with you.
So we heard Mike Zimmer talking about the offensive line at the top of the hour and saying that there's little things to clean up. Garrett Bradbury, he didn't have a whole ton to say about it, but I want to talk about the interior of the offensive line because watching back the All-22 and seeing kind of what happened, a great performance for sure. Just taking a look at like the overall body of work here with the run game. But it feels like there's things that will start to get exposed when you're not going against a team that is looks like a dumpster fire from the first like 2 minutes of the game, like Atlanta.
Right.
I'm really worried about Pat Elflein. Should I be? Because I went watching back on that, it's more than just the sack that he gave up. He really, really looked bad, in pass blocking. And I mean, I know that that's never been like his strength, but
Right.
there's in run blocking too. I know that PFF had a pretty low grade for him there. Should I not be worried about this, or is this?
No, I think it's definitely something you should be worried about. Like I get it, Grady Jarrett, he's a good player and he deserves his extension. He's one of the young and up and coming dudes. He's not an Aaron Donald-esque, but he's about as close as you're going to get to it in the younger version of guys in this league. But when it comes to moving a center to guard, I always get worried because they're dealing with so much more space. They forget, these coaches, they go out there, they go, well, it's going to be simple. He's going to have so much more room to work. Well, sometimes that's not what a center needs. Like if you can't play center productively and be an efficient center, what makes you think you can be a productive guard? Like now you've introduced so many more characters to this guy's role. And you're saying, hey, listen, not only do you don't have to snap the ball, but now you have all this space you have to play with. Like I get it. You think it's easy, but it's not. And when you're looking at this game, I think that there was not a lot of violent strikes with Pat. And I think that when you're talking about the pass pro, it's going to take some time. You're playing center for so long. There's only certain guys that rush you. There's not a lot of pass rushers that move into the center position to rush them. So you can get all the practice you want. And I've talked about this before, but until you're in a live game, like a real life game, you don't know what that's going to be like. And those guys are so much quicker now than they used to be. So I think Pat's dealing with a whole new world that he's kind of stepping into and figuring out that it's probably not as easy as he thought.
So when he was playing center, I used to go back and look at just how he was performing. A lot of it was just helping guards, right? I mean, so the guard is handling his guy, but Elflein can kind of get a shot in him if he's got that opportunity. When you're the guard, though, you've got to be the first line of defense there.
Absolutely. And there's times that the center slides away. I mean, if the center's going away, then now you have a whole bunch of new space to work with. And when you talk about a center going to play guard, you're right. You're thinking about a guy that at one point was doing all the cleaning up and like the easy job, right? Because like anytime there's a zero nose, the coaches tell you can't leave the center. Like you got to get him on. He's a center. He's not meant to block this kind of stuff. You're like, okay, I got it. When all of a sudden you're the guy that they're like, hey, we're sliding to you or we're not sliding to you, and that's where things get tricky for Pat, I think. And he's not one of these long guys. I feel like long offensive linemen are becoming a new thing and a new trend, and I'm liking it because they get their advantages. They get their arms on quicker. You get your hands on the defensive
Seems like some
lineman.
bias there from you.
There is some bias, but you're seeing more of these offensive linemen becoming longer and leaner, and you're seeing like, oh, hey, listen, they're slowing down the pass rush because they're getting their hands on quicker. When you get these short arm guys, they have to wait, and you have to wait for a move sometimes because you have to be strategic about when you throw your hands in there. And when you have short hands, you only have a limited amount of time.
Is it safe to say that maybe this isn't the best scheme fit for him, though, in an outside zone when you ask for guys to do things with more athletic frames? And I mean, yeah. Garrett Bradbury is a completely different build, and I know that he kind of got the knock of like the short arms and being smaller, but
lighter.
It feels like Pat Elflein might be the outlier among the five there, just in terms of it being a good fit.
No, I agree, and I think that maybe Pat doesn't look the most athletic, and I can say that because he's an Ohio State guy, and so am I. I'm older, so I can get away with certain things. But at the end of the day, I think he is the outlier, But to certain people's credit, sometimes when you're the bigger guy, you can withstand more things. Like I think about watching Garrett Bradbury's tape, and I'm thinking this guy's kind of getting pushed all over the place, and he's kind of getting spun all over the place, and he's not putting his feet in the right place, and sometimes when you're bigger and you're heavier, you can kind of maneuver your body in places that you don't want to, but it can afford you more time in the pass game, as opposed to a Garrett Bradbury who's just going to get pushed around by everybody.
I was thinking about this last night watching Oakland's offensive line, and they're all your size or bigger.
They're huge.
They're massive.
I mean, those guys are genuinely some of the biggest guys I've ever met. Like, I remember going to the NFLPA conference and sitting down next to him, and I was like, God, these look like sumo wrestlers. Like, they're just some
Fred Brown is 380.
They're huge, and they're so quick. It's incredible.
And that's like kind of been their MO for a couple of years. Like when I was out there covering them in 2016, and they're running like this. I mean, they had like a power scheme. Like these guys are massive, and I guess you kind of expect that more. But to like you were mentioning with a guy like Trent Brown, who's like a ginormous human being, and seeing how effective that is.
But it does have its negatives too, because don't get me wrong, Trent's a great player, and I played with Trent in San Fran when he first came on, and then he obviously went to the Patriots. And how hard could it be to be Tom Brady's left tackle? I'm going to be honest with you.
No, he gets the ball out quick.
2.2 seconds, dude. Hey, can you just get in front of that guy for a quick second? Okay, literally, that's all I need. Like, okay, gotcha. But he is a good player. But his problem is when you start to work him and you work his inside and his outside, or his outside and his inside, you keep changing it up. Eventually, you're going to wear him down. And that's when he's not so strong. And it takes guys a long time to do it because he's so long and he can get his hands on you so quick that he almost instantly shuts down the pass rush. But the guys that work him inside and outside and get him to kind of move his feet a little bit and wear him out mentally and physically, those are the guys that get advantages on him.
Where my mind went, Alex, was the way that this offensive line for the Vikings is built is the anti-Raiders. So the Raiders have these massive human beings and they're moving bodies. And so the Vikings are using like a 1998 size offensive line of guys that are barely 300 pounds. And I think that there's an advantage to that. Clearly, they moved quickly in the zone runs and in the power scheme stuff that they ran on Sunday. But at the same time, when you are being asked to pass block guys that are essentially defensive ends lining up over guards like Grady Jarrett, who's on the smaller side but incredibly quick on a weekly basis, I wonder if there's like a big trade-off there that you make to have a small offensive line that is not going to be as good at handling these guys.
Well, that's when you start to say, hey, listen, we got to get the ball out of our hands quickly. Or what you do is you go, hey, we're going to go play action, which and this is always so hard for me to explain as an offensive lineman, and I don't know why, but maybe this will be easier. When you're running these play action plays, you're taking these huge deep shots down the field. You're running these dig routes, these Dino routes, long routes, and you're buying time through the play action and the fake. But not only that, you cap both sides, so both tackles are capped with tight ends basically. And at the end of the day, you let the interior all work together. So there's a slide coming to everybody when you're doing a play action. And that's how you're going to hide all these passes. And you're going to get all these chunk plays and all these dig plays. Because let's be honest, Dalvin Cook is so effective right now. Week 1, he's probably the scariest running back in the NFL right now. So now everybody's going to have to go back and say, what are we going to do to stop this run? And you have him on the play action instantly.
And I mean, didn't look like Atlanta was able to stop the cutback whatsoever, even
At all.
anticipate it. I don't know what that was. But one thing I wanted to get before we wrap this part up, I mean, Garrett Bradbury, I know that Mike Zimmer said there was a couple times that like they were all going one way and they kind of backdoored him. So those are things I guess you can assume that you could probably clean up relatively easy. But what kind of challenge does he have? It's a satisfactory checkmark type performance from week one. But what from what you saw from him, like what flaws in his game are better teams like the Green Bay Packers and what they have coming up going to be able to pick apart?
Well, I think it's mostly going to be what are the veterans going to be able to pick apart from him. And, the reason that he's having problems is because he's not sustaining these blocks. And when I say that, you talk about a guy playing backdoor on somebody or cutting back or you're going with him and then he cuts back. That's because you don't have enough force into him. You're not driving them. You're not telling them, hey, this is where you're going to go. At some point, he's playing you. And I think a lot of that has to be his size. When you play as a small player, people are going to treat you like a small player. But when you're in somebody's grill and you're going to hit them really hard and you're going to start throwing your hands into people's face and doing whatever you got to do to kind of set the tone, like, hey, I know I'm a rookie and I know I'm smaller than everybody out here, but I don't play these games. And I think that that's the one thing I wanted to see and I didn't. And I'm not saying I'm down about it. I'm indifferent about it. I think he played okay. He's a rookie. He's young. That's a good team at the end of the day. It's still a win in his column. So I think that next week coming out, I want to see more violence from him. I want to see him attack more people. I want to see him going after more people. I don't want to see him standing up and kind of getting pushed around. Go be in this fight.
Football.
Man, regular season Alex Boone takes it up a notch. Like, we got to see him in this fight. Let's go. Football.
I do.
That was good. That was great, actually. Let's one more thing before we take a break. I wanted you to explain what it means to have multiple running schemes like they did the other day, because when Cook runs the one to the left for the touchdown.
Wasn't it the first touchdown was a power scheme?
Right. When you run 38 times, I can't remember exactly when they were, but I think it was the first touchdown. Is that was like pin and pull, right? I mean, that looked like some old school power there, as opposed to the zone that we've been talking about all the time. And if you could be multiple and mix and match with these schemes, I think they could be really good in the running game.
Absolutely. I mean, you talk about opening up your offense to tosses, to whacks, trucks, all these plays that are on the outside perimeter. And then you talk about, I think at one point, and I'm not sure, I got to go back and look at the all-22, but I think at one point I saw 2 traps. And it's been a long time since I've seen a trap play, so I got really excited.
Gary.
It wasn't very effective, but I want to go back and double check to see what it was. Maybe somebody had an MA. But I think that when you open up an offense like this and you have all these plays, you force defenses to focus on everything. And you say, hey, listen, how are they going to attack us? What's our, is our 3 technique a liability? Is he going to get trapped? Are they going to deuce him? Are they going to backside cut him? There's so many things that when you put all this on tape, everybody goes, now we have to practice against all these plays. And now we got to, they might not have been effective in the game. And hey, listen, it's week 1. We're still trying to figure out what we are. We know what our identity is somewhat, but we're still trying to figure out if we can hit these inside zones, because a lot of those didn't seem very effective to me. And when you can't run it inside and you can only run it outside, well, now you've shortened the field for yourself, and that's not a good thing. So you got to come back and make those inside plays more effective.
All right, we've got the neck roll of the week coming up, that we're going to each hand out someone a neck roll for an old school gritty performance. That's coming up a little later in the show. Next, I want to talk about the NFC North after this week. I think it's really hard to figure out what's going on still and how much we can learn and whether this is sustainable for the Vikings. So Alex Boone with us, Courtney Cronin from ESPN. We'll be right back here on